When our best fur friends leave our world, many of us are left wanting one last scritch, one last hug, one last walk together. One Last Network is a space for pet guardians to honor their pets in their senior years and to cope with the days leading up to and after their passing. Here's your host, Angela Schneider, founder of One Last Network and Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington.
Welcome to One Last Network, and this week's episode, The Art of Staying Open. I first encountered Bryn Souza several years ago as a member of a writers group called BlogPaws, and through the Dog Writers Association of America. We met in person the first time at the DWAA annual awards ceremony in February 2020, and again this past spring at Global Pet Expo in Orlando, Florida. To know Bryn is to see the sunshine in every day. She has a bright, engaging personality, and she loves dogs. Oh, my dog, how she loves dogs, especially her Boston Terriers. A graduate of Quinnipiac University, and I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, with a master's in business administration, Bryn is smart and articulate. She hosts a blog about her life with her dogs at adogwalksintoabar.com, and she's now the marketing director of Pet Hub, the first company to launch a QR code ID tag in an attempt to lower the United States' dismal return-to-owner rate for lost pets. Bryn's life took an awful turn in 2022. She lost her beloved Bean, her marriage, her cat Mimi, the home she loved. I wish I could have reached out to her and said, "Hey, I'm here if you need me," but I was in my own shitty year. I've brought Bryn onto the podcast now to share her journey through these last 18 months. Through it all, she has remained positive and open to signs sent to her from Yoda and Bean, who are both in the next realm now, wherever that may be. Have a listen. Hello, Bryn Souza. How are you today?
I am doing well in chilly Connecticut. Right now, it's colder than I expected it to be.
It's colder in Washington State than it's supposed to be.
Yes, at least everything's not on fire anymore, so I'll take it for what it is.
Yeah, for now. We're going to say for now here because it's coming and we know it.
For sure.
Okay, first of all, did I say Bryn Souza correctly?
You did. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, good. So one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you onto the podcast was because you had a shitty 2022. And 23 didn't start off all that well either. Why don't you have a little rundown of life as Bryn Souza in the last little while?
So the beginning part of 2022 was pretty calm. Thought everything was status quo. My dog Bean was sick with Cushing's, but it seemed relatively well managed. She was on a variety of medications, and her ability to be mobile and her energy level seemed okay. And then she pretty quickly took a downward turn, I would say, beginning part of January. And I kept on looking for those signs of joy that she used to have, of like wiggling her tail and being able to sort of prance when she walked, and those things weren't there anymore. So she was existing, but she wasn't necessarily who she had been. So I had a conversation with my friend, and I think you're familiar with her as well, Dr. Busby, who has been very frank with me in the past about quality of life conversations. She's a veterinarian based in South Carolina, and she's a friend of mine. So she was very forthcoming in sharing that Bean's quality of life was probably not what it had been. So I scheduled a time for her to be, helped over on the other side. I think it was a Tuesday. So I got my job offer. So it was a crazy week. I got my job offer with Pet Hub, the company I currently work for, on Monday. Bean was euthanized on Tuesday, so that next day. Thursday of that week, My husband told me he didn't love me anymore. Um, it's going to be a wild ride, so just hold on for a hot minute.
Yeah.
So I processed that for a bit, and he kept on encouraging me, and it was weird. He kept on encouraging me to go to my parents' house in Connecticut on my own to grieve. And very rarely had I been going to my parents' house without him. So I pushed back, and I didn't fully understand what was going on. But I did. I wound up leaving on, I believe, Friday, brought Yoda with me, went down to Connecticut, and I had to come back the following week to sign for my work laptop. It hadn't shown up yet, and it was FedEx. So I made my way back on Tuesday, and my husband wasn't there, but there was a journal, which he doesn't keep a journal. So I naturally read it. And in it shared that he had intimate relations with one of my best friends. So I packed everything up. I signed for my work laptop. So it came, and I signed for it. I packed up my cat, the dog, all of the stuff I could, got out of Dodge, went down to Connecticut, and I initiated divorce. So for a couple of weeks, I was trying to figure out what that meant and what the process was. And do I go for a lawyer? What do I do? So I figured out what those different steps were, communicated with him as I needed. I had to rehome my cat. So Mimi, she's lovely. And my parents' home is not really, it's just not cat friendly. There's a whole bunch of breakable things. So it's just a bad idea. So she wound up being placed with my sister. So she still is in the family. I get to visit her, but she wasn't in my space any longer. So in the span of essentially 2 weeks, I lost my husband, my home, my best friend, my cat, my spirit dog, my heart dog, my job, all of that very quickly. And then I had to sort of refigure out what life meant. So I lived with my parents for 8 months. Yoda was with me the entire time, and he flourished as an individual dog. His personality came out in a way that I didn't expect. He was so funny. He went on adventures with me. I moved into my place, so I'm now in a condo close to my parents. But I moved into a place in November. Christmas season was wonky. I was dreading the idea of like creating my own memories and having my own traditions and all of those movies that we would watch together and all of those other things. I had an interesting relationship with Christmas this year as I tried to figure out what that actually meant and where my joy was coming from. But I set up a tree. I did a lot of crying. Yoda was with me. And then he had a seizure on December, I think it was like 18th, something like that. Had never had a seizure before. It was quick, so I didn't really know what to expect. I thought it would be a fluke. It happened again on Friday. So then at that point, I was like, probably not a fluke. So I brought him to my regular veterinarian. We had a conversation about brain tumors, among other things. I scheduled an appointment with a specialist, a neurologist that's at a clinic about 30-ish minutes from where I'm currently living. And it was on January 9th, which at that point seemed like so many millions of years away. So I pushed for another date with a clinic that actually is a little bit closer. And I was able to be seen, I think it was January 3rd. So they were able to actually set up a neurology appointment with an MRI the following day. So when I met with a neurologist, we did some testing on, how his reflexes were working and his reaction time. And I left him behind. Like, I didn't realize that the next day was going to be the MRI. So I didn't expect to have to say goodbye, but I did. So dropped him off, gave him some kisses. He was put under anesthesia early in the morning. And I got a call from the neurologist saying that it was I don't remember the kind of tumor, but or kind of cancer, but it's basically inoperable. It's pretty aggressive and moves pretty quickly. So at that point, we were talking about palliative care, which I was not mentally prepared for.
Yeah.
So we put him on a slew of different medications, including what you would expect, phenobarbital, and kept something with a K, um, and a steroid. The poor guy had to pee so much. I changed his food. We did as much as we could. And I had a log of his seizures. And January, it's almost a month from when the first seizure showed up. I had a dream that I was fighting with my husband because Yoda was having a seizure. And my husband at the time was saying, it's not a big deal. And then when I woke up, Yoda was having a seizure. So he did not come out of it. I timed it. It was over 20 minutes. I was like, okay, I gotta go. So I picked him up, brought him to, the neurologist, which was, well, the 24-hour vet, which was supposed to be 30 minutes away. And I got there in 15. And he never came out. So they talked about bringing him back with whatever medications. And I said, to what end? Like, yes, I could possibly end that seizure and I might have him for some window of time, but for how long and how well his quality of life will be, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I had to say goodbye. So it's been a hard, essentially year and I don't know, a couple of months.
Yeah. There's a thing called multiple grief. I think I might be getting the term wrong, but it is experiencing a succession of griefs or multiple at a time. Were you able to experience grief for each one of those incidents on their own, or did you have to do it all together?
That I think was one of the primary reasons why. I mean, I was mad with my husband for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the reasons was I didn't get a chance to grieve the loss of Bean.
Hmm.
And I didn't really have an opportunity. I essentially went into like trauma, let's fix these immediate thing modes. So I didn't really process the loss of Bean the way I probably should. But in another regard, those other issues I didn't have a chance to dwell. So I don't necessarily know. I should have had more time to grieve, and also having some other place to put my time and attention based on my personality type was probably to my benefit in some regard. But I have sort of glommed acts together that aren't necessarily, how you like, I don't know, you tie your shoes and you trip. So sometimes you're like, oh, well, because I tied my shoes, next time I'm going to trip, even though those two things aren't necessarily correlated.
Sure.
I believe that I've correlated some things that aren't really relatable acts just because they happened to overlap with time. But I'm at least I'm able to recognize that some of those aspects have happened. And I have a therapist who has helped me to identify where that's coming up. So I don't have irrational fears of, like, for example, getting into a relationship. Like, there was that conversation of, well, if I have a relationship or a relationship ends, will something happen to my pet? When in reality, like, those two things happened.
Our brain connects things in weird ways sometimes.
Yeah.
So how did all of that affect your loss with Yoda? Especially when our dogs die, it's so unfair because those relationships mean more to us, people like us, in so many ways. And so to have that taken away from you when you needed Yoda as a comfort for having lost Bean in your marriage, in your home, and your cat, what was that like?
It was a shock because I thought we would have more time. And I know that we do this in life in general, where we take things for granted because we believe there's more yards on that runway.
Mm.
And so I believed that there would be more time, and that was a challenge. He was 9. He wasn't even 10. And he, up to that point, had never had, he was just a potato with legs. He had no health issues. I never even had to bring him in for a dental. I had a senior screen, and with him, the prior, when I got back to my parents' house, it was like one of the first things I did. And his blood work came back fantastic. Like, everything looked so good. So the initial shock of the tumor was challenging, but also the then conversation about like end of life care was certainly just uprooting. And I know people say stuff for the right reasons,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it's better to not say anything at all. Because and I didn't share this with everyone, but I would share with some folks, with some of the stuff that was happening in my life. And invariably, 2 things would come out of people's mouths. One, it's so good that you don't have children. Because, like, now you don't have to worry about the end of your relationship, and also having to worry about, who's responsible for the child, and going to court about custody and all of that stuff. So I understand, and it still stings.
Mm-hmm.
And the other default response for a lot of people was, at least you still have Yoda, which was true.
Until it wasn't.
So it was hard. And then at one point, people were also talking about, like, I don't know how to phrase it, but basically you get what you put in, and like the stress associated with the end of my marriage somehow affected Yoda's health, which I get it. People were like basically saying like it needed to go somewhere, so it was manifesting. And I get that. And it's hard to not take ownership
Mm.
of something that you can't control.
Yeah. That's guilt coming in to play, I think. And
yeah,
we want so hard to do everything for them when they need us to, because they do so much for us. But sometimes we can't.
No.
And our brain tries to rationalize those things by blaming ourselves or others. But the fact is, Yoda had cancer. Yoda had a bad tumor. Yoda was having bad seizures. Yoda's time had come.
Correct. And there was that conversation of like, right, causative nature. Did I do something?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I spoke with the veterinarian, when I had a sort of an intake conversation with Bug, I even asked, did I feed something wrong? Should I be changing diet? All of these different things. And she said, and I love her. I friend requested this veterinarian on Facebook, which I was like, I don't know how creepy this is going to be, but I'm going to friend request you. And I promise I won't spam you with questions that are vet specific when you're not on the clock. That's not, I have friends who work in the veterinary field. I'm not going to do that. But I love you as a person. And the first thing that she said to me was like, listen, I've worked with dogs and cats that have lived in dumpsters and have literally eaten trash and have lived to 22. So even if you had fed your dog something that might have had a causative nature, chances are you would have gotten 2 months extra from it wouldn't, none of this is enough of a reason why, like, you didn't do anything as a pet parent to have caused this to happen in such a way where his quality of life or the length of his life was significantly altered because of it.
Right.
And when she put that perspective in, I think a lot of us as pet parents were trying to essentially wrap our pets in bubble wrap and protect them from things because we know the inevitable where we will likely outlive them exists. And that's a hard reality to face. So we're trying to do what we can. And I understand that and appreciate that. And now realize that we can do what we can to the best of our ability. And best laid plans are best laid plans. They don't necessarily lead to the outcome that we're hoping for.
So you put up a Facebook post recently. We're friends on Facebook as well because you're lovely and you friended me in a similar way some years ago.
I know. I'm like, hey, let's not be creepy. And I would like to be friends with you.
And it was because we're both members of the Dog Writers Association of America, right?
Correct. I think that's how it started. The downward spiral started there. Yes.
Yes. And we met for the first time right before the entire world shut down.
Yeah. That was the last time we were in this. Yeah.
Yep. Still think I dodged a bullet by going through so many airports and being on so many planes.
For real. Yeah. And I was standing next to a woman who was a reporter for the New York Times when we were at Westminster. We were looking at what kind of dogs are they? Maltese. And I had never hung out with a Maltese before. So I was like, let's hang out in this ring and see what happens. And the lovely, lovely person from the New York Times looked like garbage. And so I told her, I was like, are you feeling okay? And she's like, no, I feel really sick. Like I have a fever. I was standing next to her for 40 minutes while we were there. And I like COVID was just being washed over me probably. And somehow I made it back to New England without having caught it, which is just shocking to me.
I know, right? So yeah. On your Facebook post recently, you mentioned something about a sign. What sign did you see and what did it tell you to do?
So I've seen signs from both Bean and Yoda, and the signs are different. So Bean normally sends me hawks. That's typically how I see her. And it's usually when I'm not looking for it. I'm either driving or I'm walking around and I'll either hear one, or I'll see one when I'm driving, and I know that it's just her checking in. And the reason why I believe that to be the case is she died in February. I think it was February. And I don't normally see a lot of hawks in February around here. I mean, I see them, but not as often as you do when it's warmer. And on my way back from the veterinarian after having helped her cross over, it's a 1.5 mile drive from my house in Massachusetts and the veterinarian. I saw 4 hawks.
Oh,
that's too many for that short of a drive. So that was how I sort of interpreted that from her. And with Yoda, so he died in January. And that day, a ladybug came in with me in my mail. It was on I went to the mailbox, and it just sort of did a little ride with me on my mail, and I didn't notice until I brought it in. So then I released it. I was like, you shouldn't be here. So I let it outside, and I would say 4 or 5 times shortly after that, a ladybug was somewhere in this condo, either on my window. So there was one, I got someone had sent a heart that is stained the glass that usually will have during certain times of the day, a rainbow will come through. A rainbow has never come through, even though I put it in where the sun should catch it.
Yeah.
I've never seen a rainbow come through, but there was a ladybug on it a couple of days after he passed. So that and double numbers for some reason. So every seizure he had was either at 2:22 or 11:11 or 3:30. Like when I would record the start time to see how long, like I had a little stopwatch, it almost always started at a double number. And when the GPS was taking me to the veterinarian, when he was actively seizing, it was, I think, 33 miles. And it was going to take me 33 minutes according to the GPS.
Wow.
So just wonky double number stuff that I didn't really anticipate. But when I was picking up Bug, when I set up the GPS, it told me that it was 111 miles. And I was going to arrive at, like, I think 5:55 or some other double number kind of situation. And I screenshotted it because, like, that's just that he's telling me, he's saying it's okay. Because I felt guilty about, am I making the right choice with this new little creature? But I think he was telling me it was okay.
Who's Bug?
Bug is
You mentioned him a couple of times now, so introduce Bug.
Bug is a Boston Terrier that joined me similarly to Yoda. So Yoda was a retired stud. His services were no longer requested. He did not deliver on whatever he was supposed to deliver on. I think he was supposed to deliver lilac colored Bostons, which I have opinions about, but he did not, or lilac or blue or whatever, but he just delivered run-of-the-mill black and white, and apparently that was not adequate. So he was released from his duties as a breeder, and I acquired him right after BlogPaws. So I think I showed up at BlogPaws in Nashville, I guess 10 years ago, and then a couple of days later, after, when I came back, I picked up Yoda. So Bug started out as, his name was Reaper when he was as a breeder. And I just, like, I hope that it was a person who really, really likes Blue Oyster Cult and it's like, don't fear the Reaper, or they are very fond of hot peppers. But it's just such a name. So I was
little, just like
a cute little round, like, he's just so innocent looking. So I was waffling between either Blue for Blue Oyster Cult, because I like that name as well. But I kept on sort of gravitating towards Bug because of ladybugs. So that's who he is. So Bug is also a retired stud. He is also a Boston Terrier. He is black and white like Yoda, and he has some brindle. And he never delivered on his goods. He was shooting blanks, apparently. So he did not create any offspring, but darn, he's cute. So he's a year and a half. His birthday will be in December. He still has his cash and prizes, so I have not yet neutered him. So we had an appointment last week, and we'll talk about a neuter soon, but it hasn't happened yet. And he's such a sweet little guy. And he's very
you don't want to take the chance that those boys start swimming.
No, he'll be neutered. But he has some elevated liver levels, so we're figuring out. He probably has Lyme disease. He tested positive for Lyme disease, so we're treating that, and then we'll do the neuter. But he's such a sweet little guy. And he has similarities to Bean and Yoda from a personality style, but he is his own little character, and I'm always conscientious of, like, making sure that I'm not, like, replacing someone. And he's perfect in his own little way, but he's definitely his own different personality, which I really appreciate too. And I did foster, so I fostered some dogs beforehand, because I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. So I thought maybe fostering would be a good way to do that. I had a poodle. Man, that dog was smart and also a pain in my ass. So I loved him, and I was happy to see him find a forever home that was familiar with poodles. His name was Watson. He did not solve any mysteries, but his name was Watson. And then I had Ollie, who was a rat terrier, who my dad fell in love with him. He was the sweetest little guy. But I just didn't feel like it was right. I didn't see any signs. They both have found their forever homes. And it helped, those two different types of breeds helped to reaffirm my affection for this particular breed, which I know that each dog is an individual and each dog has their own personality, but Bostons have my heart in a lot of ways. So it helped to reaffirm my affection for that breed as well.
Well, you don't need to convince me that there's one breed for some people. That's
yeah.
Do you intentionally look for the signs, or do you wait for them to come, or do they just happen?
Usually they just happen. I try to allow myself the opportunity to be aware, I think, and this is true for people in general, so many people are so plugged into their phones all the time that they're not necessarily aware of their surroundings that are happening and where those signs may be popping up. So I give myself the opportunity to, for example, in the morning, I don't look at my phone when I'm having my coffee. I don't have any technology happening, or I try to just sit and be. And I also will do that in the evenings. I'll try to do some writing on an old school journal, and give myself time to just allow for my thoughts to function, but also to be aware of my surroundings and those different things. And when I drive, I don't listen to music when I drive. Sometimes I'll listen to podcasts, but that's usually when I do my best thinking. That in the shower when I'm lathering, rinsing, and repeating. So those, I'm not intentionally looking for signs, but I am giving myself the opportunity for being aware of when things are popping up.
It would have been so easy for you to close yourself off after everything that happened. Staying open to those experiences and moments requires you to make that choice. Why do you make that choice instead of just shutting everything out?
I'm a perpetual optimist. I know, it's probably a fatal flaw, but I will always be an optimistic person, even when things are dark. That's just who I am. If it's raining, I'm looking for rainbows. If it's dark, I'm looking for shooting stars. I'm not looking at the dark part. I'm looking at the other pieces that come up, the beauty that can come from those icky bits. So I think it's a personality style of mine, but there's so many beautiful things out there and beautiful and wonderful people that if I stopped myself from being able to receive and care for those people or individuals, then I wouldn't be the person I am. And an example, we shouldn't be friends. You and I shouldn't be friends. Geographically, It doesn't make sense. There's so many reasons why a long distance friendship, for which we will, who knows when we will see each other in person again, and for what purpose and for how long. Those are things that in many cases should sort of stop a person from even seeking friendship. And yet I know that I'm the kind of person who I keep tabs. I pick up strays and I hold on to them with everything I've got. And I care deeply about the people that are in my circle. And my sarcastic meanness is exactly who I am online as I am. There's no filter. And I am who I am, and I try not to be apologetic about it, but gosh, there's so many amazing people out there. There's a lot of assholery out there too, but gosh, the people who are my people that have come into my circle, I'm so grateful that I gave myself the opportunity let them in. So a shitty husband shouldn't be a reason why I pretend that all of the people in the world are bad people.
Good point.
Yeah. And I'll do a light hex every once in a while, and I shouldn't, and I'm not qualified, but I will. And like people get what they put out into the world. So what will happen with him is his life. And I'm sure something will happen that is deserved.
Bless and just bless and release. Good luck.
Yeah. So I will tell you, and I don't know how I feel about, I still don't know how I feel about this. But someone recommended an animal communicator right after Yoda. I think he was diagnosed, but he was still alive. And I was just like, I just don't know, but what's the harm, right? And putting myself out there and throwing, I think, $50 at this person, and if nothing else, I paid for her latte. And so I did it, and it wound up just being a phone call. It wasn't like a video call. Hold on, I have to yell at Bug.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, stop. He's licking his cash and prizes in a way that's unsavory. So I had to address that. So this lady called, I don't remember her name. And she said a lot of stuff that, could be usable in a lot of different contexts. So it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't like, oh my God. But she did say a few things where I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that makes sense. And I recorded it. One was, he keeps on asking for ice cubes, which is very specific. And Yoda was obsessed with ice cubes to the point where, so my parents have the ice cube thing where there's a button on the front door of the fridge, and you can choose water, or you can choose ice, or you can choose crushed if you're feeling fancy. So my dad would give him multiple ice cubes, and I was worried that he was going to break his teeth because he would the unbridled joy, and made me feel like I was a bad cop, because I'm like, we need to sort of tamp this down a little bit. But I wanted to make sure that he didn't get hurt. So he was then relegated to a single ice cube a day. And so we had, like, in the family, we had to talk to each other, like, who gave Yoda an ice cube? But he, like, those Looney Tunes cartoons where the characters are running so fast that their legs look like little circles.
Oh yeah,
they're moving so fast.
Yeah,
that's how he, like, and he was a potato. I have never seen this animal move this quickly unless there was an ice cube involved. And so he heard the little button get pressed. There was a little bing, and he, from anywhere in the house, would sprint to get this ice cube. And it was thoroughly entertaining every time. So the fact that this communicator essentially guilted me through Yoda to remind me that I should be giving him more ice cubes was hysterical and also spot on. So now that I knew that he was essentially going to die, I gave him as many ice cubes as he wanted. But then the other thing that she said, which maybe it just makes me feel better, but she said, he's not done protecting you, and he wants permission to come back and be reincarnated.
Oh.
And I mean, I gave permission. I was like, what do I, like, do I have to write him a letter? So I said, oh yes, he has permission. And I do think, especially with this new guy, like, he is already very attached to me. He's very protective of me. And I hope that he won't resource guard me, because Yoda started to do that, and that was an issue. But I was like, I feel very cared for, and also I can sit next to other people. So I do think that there are elements of Yoda that come through with this new little personality that maybe it's him being reincarnated in whatever form that means. I don't really even know what that could mean. But it brought me peace to hear that from her. So even if it's just you know, a placebo in medium form, I'm still going to take it for what it is. But it helped me. So I appreciated that contact. That I probably wouldn't have done it if someone hadn't recommended it.
Maybe there are things we're just not supposed to know.
Yeah. Yep.
What is one last thing you can leave us with, whether it's a piece of advice from Bryn Souza or a note from Yoda or Bean or what have you?
I think one of the most beautiful things about pets, dogs, cats as well, but I think they're all secretly wanting to take over our lives too. But particularly dogs, they're not looking in the past. They're not dwelling on the past, and they're not worrying about the future. They are so single-mindedly embracing the right now that when all of these people are talking about mindfulness and spending money on that, like, dogs are mindfulness in physical form. And if we can learn anything from them, it's how to live in a mindful way of what happened 15 minutes ago, it's gone. And unless there's a treat, who gives a shit? But I'm also not going to worry. My dog does not care if there's a meeting in 2 weeks about something. There is no wherewithal about that. And that's such a beautiful thing to sort of try to emulate as much as possible. So if we can be the creatures that our dogs are in that regard, I think we would be a better population of people.
And we'd save a ton of money on self-help books and therapists.
For real. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Bryn. This has been an absolute joy to chat with you. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. I appreciated it. And I hope this helps someone in some way down the road.
If we could be the creatures our dogs are, living in the moment, forgetting the past, and not worrying about the future. I have this one video of Bella hiking a trail. Her steps are slow and intentional, planting each paw into the ground as she moves forward. Her head is on a swivel. She is paying attention to everything around her, and she is smiling. I watch it over and over and over again to remind myself to slow down, enjoy the world around me more. I need that video because I forget, often in all the beautiful chaos of running a dog photography business and One Last Network. We also tend to forget how fleeting time is. We never have enough of it, even though we're the ones filling our days with things to do. And there's none of it left when we're facing the end of a life. We always want more. More hugs, more scritches, more walks, more I love yous, more everything. If, as Bryn says, we try to be more dog, we can fill our days with more of the moments that matter. The gentle walks in the woods, the intentional footfalls, and the thoughtful observation of what's happening around us. Then we may live more fully, just like a dog. Next week, I have a chat with Lynn Sainert of Lance and Lily Pet Photography in Ashburn, Virginia. Lynn is one of the few professional pet photographers I know who dedicates her business to senior dogs and end-of-life sessions. Her pets and their people images are some of the best I've seen. Until then, I'm Angela Schneider, owner of Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington, and your host at One Last Network, signing off to go get some Bella snuggles. Listen to One Last Network on whichever podcast platform you prefer. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you have a friend who might be interested in our content, make sure you share us with them. Thanks for listening.